Welcome back to episode 173 of the Block Runner Podcast. I'm your host, William, always here with your co-host, Iman.
What's going on, dude?
And on the sticks, we got TJ.
Hello.
And most importantly, today, we are having Ken, the CEO of Xverse Wallet, joining us today. Appreciate you for joining us, Ken.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man. So maybe it was like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we did a video on your guys' announcement.
Yeah, it was a big one.
It's a huge deal because this is, I think, the first time that a project within the ordinal space gets an investment.
Yeah, I think, I guess perpetually throughout our existence in Web3, we've always found ourselves in, I don't know, spaces, I guess, where we have to question our own sanity because we're in such a niche environment, and it seems like the outside world around us doesn't necessarily agree with our thesis at the time. Right. And then these things happen, like previously in our metaverse endeavors, like all of a sudden, you know, Facebook pivots to Meta. It's like, oh, all of a sudden the world does appreciate what we're working on. Right.
That's right.
So now we're refocusing on the ordinal space. Is this actually something that is important, or is it just us? Are we the crazy ones? So you guys getting your funding and announcing it was a big, like, I think, inflection turning point.
It's a confirmation that the space is legit.
Yes. Yeah. So we made that video because to us, that was like we correlated to the beacon, right? The signal in Lord of the Rings or whatever. That, to me, that's what it felt like. Like the beacon has been lit.
Yeah.
Now the signal has been sent to the rest of the world. Building it for Bitcoin is a big deal, right? So we definitely want to get into the meat and potatoes of like what you guys think about like how this builder culture is going to evolve on Bitcoin, because this is all new to everybody, right? This is like a less than 1 year old phenomenon. So yeah.
So Ken, what's your background and history behind the Xverse team and the core mission?
Yeah, so I am a software engineer. That's my background. I've been, building, writing software for over a decade now. I got into crypto in 2017, and that was when I joined the Stacks team, which, Stacks is building a smart contract layer 2 on top of Bitcoin. And, I was working there for about 4 years. And, while we were working on the project, I kind of realized, there is a potential for Web3 on top of Bitcoin, especially with what Stacks is building, smart contracts and other projects as well. But there just wasn't a very compelling wallet experience on Bitcoin. Certainly nothing that can compare to the user experience of MetaMask or some of the other wallets on the other layer 1 chains. So I decided to start this company to basically build a wallet that has good user experience for Bitcoin. And some of the wallets that existed before us for Bitcoin, I think it's either, they are made by exchanges and they basically support everything, or, they're a multi-chain wallet, or they're like a very, 100% Bitcoin focused wallet, but it's more geared towards like power users who care about security and privacy above everything else. And it just wasn't a great user experience. So for us, one of the biggest problems that we wanted to solve was how do we make this user experience better? Because I think in order to onboard, the mainstream users, you need to have a good user experience. And what was out there in the market at the time just wasn't going to cut it. So, in the beginning, when we founded the company, we shipped our first MVP wallet, which was a Bitcoin wallet, and that also supported Stacks for the Web3 functionality. So you could have NFTs and other things, swaps, fungible tokens on top of this layer 2. And from there, I guess, basically the beginning of this year, we saw the rise of Ordinals.
Yes.
And it was basically, everything we wanted to build on layer 2, but directly on layer 1, right?
Yeah.
And it just made sense for us to support it because we were already a Bitcoin wallet. We supported NFTs or NFT-like functionality and smart contracts. So it took us about 4 days basically to to build support for very basic support for ordinals, and we shipped that, and you could basically have a graphical UI to store and view your ordinals. Before that, people were using Sparrow Wallet, which they don't support ordinals officially, and it was very easy to make a mistake when you use it because you had to basically keep track of every unspent output and make sure that you don't accidentally spend it. And then from there, we decided to go deeper, and we were the first ones to ship the Bitcoin wallet API, which basically enabled marketplaces to make these PSBT swaps of ordinals with Bitcoin. And basically we grew from there.
That's interesting. So basically you had built a wallet that was focused just primarily on just like Bitcoin and people using it P2P, and all of a sudden Ordinals, I guess was released by Casey Rothermore. At the time, how did you know to support the Ordinals ecosystem so early when there was very little traction, and like why the decision to support Ordinals in the first place so early on?
So I think in the beginning of this year, basically the markets were down in crypto overall, right?
Yeah.
And what we saw was that there was actually a lot of activity happening in the Bitcoin space, especially with ordinals. There was a lot of discussion on Twitter, even though the tools for ordinals were like very primitive and you had to be like, an expert when it comes to Bitcoin in order to use it. And inscribing wasn't that easy either. You had to like run your own node. But we saw that even with all these difficulties and friction, people wanted to, inscribe things and use ordinals. And I think we saw this potential, and we decided to basically invest our time and resources into this and just see where it takes us.
So what is it about ordinals that you think people, were reinvigorated to build on top of Bitcoin? Like,
yeah, because Stacks has been around for a long time, and there's more like functionality and more robustness available on that layer 2, right? And we've already seen layer 2 is a flourishing ecosystem on Ethereum, right? And a lot of projects that originated from layer 1 of Ethereum have migrated to layer 2 to fulfill your thesis of, if we're ever going to have mainstream adoption, we need that optimum user experience, right? It can't be done on layer 1 as far as we know. So yeah, why all of a sudden are we, I guess, from that thesis perspective, we're kind of regressing in a way from a user experience standpoint, but we've unlocked something that's pulling on all of our heartstrings. I don't know, something we're all being gravitated towards it for whatever reason. What do you think that is?
So I think there's a combination of things, but first and foremost, ordinals are different from NFTs on other chains. They offer different properties. One of them being, it's based on Bitcoin, the most secure chain there is, and all the content for ordinals, they're written directly onto the chain, right? So it's much more durable compared to something like NFT on Ethereum, where the actual image is stored on IPFS, or even worse, just somebody's computer with a link. And if that server, or someone decides to stop paying for that server, your content is gone, right? Whereas on Bitcoin, every Bitcoin node is storing that data, and you can be pretty sure that your data is going to be there on the chain, accessible for a really long time, right? And I think also because at the time, some of the other sort of NFT chains like Solana were experiencing some problems, and a lot of the developers there were kind of, I guess, giving up on it. And a lot of these people, they first actually started to build on Bitcoin, and then because Bitcoin just didn't offer the same ability to be built on top of, they went to Solana or the other chains. But now they see that there is this protocol on Bitcoin they basically came back and started building there, right? And then another kind of factor that I want to mention is it's actually quite simple and more straightforward compared to NFTs on other chains because there's no smart contracts involved, right? It's anybody can just go and inscribe something. And I think there was sort of like a unique property of like getting the early numbers, inscription numbers, right? And that kind of started this like land grab of people trying to inscribe the first 10,000, first 100,000. And I think that kind of just snowballed from there.
Yeah.
So what is it, why do you think something like Counterparty didn't really take off? Was it a timing issue? Was it just lack of traction? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's also a combination of things, right? I think it was way too early, and at the time, people just haven't seen a successful NFT protocol or model take off, right? But now, after this many years, people saw that NFTs can be successful, and there are tons of like NFT marketplaces and things on other chains.
Yeah.
So why not move that over to Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is infrastructure, right? I think back then there just wasn't any compelling wallet experiences or ways to like trade these things with people easily, right? And now after so many years of like innovation, people have figured out how to do these things, and even the NFT marketplaces, they were able to add support for Ordinals relatively quickly, right? As we've seen in the past, 6 months.
Do you think that Ordinals can support complex functionality? As some projects I've built on Ethereum where some NFTs are being used for DeFi, all these like different kinds of functionalities. Do you think that's possible in the Ordinals ecosystem, or do we need something a little bit more complexity built on top of Bitcoin, like some sort of smart contract layer?
So I think it is possible, but do we want to do that is the question, right?
Yeah.
if Ordinals with, I think at the peak we had like maybe 100,000, 200,000 people actively using the protocol, it already drove the prices for transactions up to a point where it just wasn't sustainable long term, right? And yeah, like if you build an even more complex system on top of that, with more transactions, it's definitely not going to be scalable, right? I think there's a purpose for people to build on top of it. I think it's more to demonstrate that it's possible, there's demand for it, and if you wanted to do everything on the base layer, maybe it's like 100 times more expensive, but it's on the base layer, you could do that, right? And that's that's something that some people might want. But I think long-term wise, if you want mass adoption, you need to have some sort of scaling solution, whether it's like a second layer or something else. And I think this is where I think stacks can come in, because there is a very robust smart contract system. It's anchored to Bitcoin, and the project is actively building out this SBTC solution, which could power all these complex applications on Bitcoin and provide sort of like a more seamless experience for you to move between the layers. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. And that's sort of what's played out in like the other chains, like Ethereum. We have like blue chip NFT projects sticking with Ethereum, and then we have like the game NFT projects on Polygon, for example. And so I tend to agree there's going to be markets for projects that are going to be willing to pay 100 times more to have an ordinal on the Bitcoin blockchain versus another project that has a little bit more functionality due to smart contracts with stacks, but it's a lot more scalable, a lot easier to use, and a lot easier to build for.
Yeah.
So that tends, I think that follows like what has, happened in the past. So what is it, what are your thoughts on like these fungible tokens on Bitcoin? Is that something that's going to have to move to a second layer, or something that we can actually continue building?
Yeah. And just to add on to that, just because I wonder myself often, like, because we've already experienced like an NFT boom and bust cycle in the previous 2021, and it definitely tapped into a lot of the mainstream zeitgeist, right? And the fallout of that is this idea of NFTs is there's a lot of negative sentiment around that. So we're kind of like recreating the same ethos, but now on Bitcoin, but we're labeling it something different. We're calling them digital artifacts. Right. And is this the narrative you think that is going to, because based on what we're seeing, if this creator culture doesn't migrate to the second layer, we're kind of stuck with just producing these products that are very eerily similar to what we've already done in Web3, right? JPEGs.
Yeah.
Very static creation, stuff like this. So from the mainstream perspective, it's like, Web3 they're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. So is this narrative enough, or do we have to build much more infrastructure ahead of time in order to create something like a new paradigm, a new wave of innovation, do you think? How important do you factor this in? Do you think about this often whenever you're all of us involved in this industry, we like to kind of think forward, like what is going to be that next thing that's going to grab everybody's attention the way NFTs did?
Yeah, I think so. Fungible tokens, I think, is important for Bitcoin. And we've seen that there is a lot of demand for that on Bitcoin with BRC20. But ultimately, BRC20 is more like an experiment and demonstrator for demand rather than something that you can take and build on top long term, right? I think, it's not going to work if you just copy what has been built on other chains and move it to Bitcoin, because there's really no incentive to do that, right? If it's already working really well on some other chain. I think if you can sort of create a similar model, but add unique properties that are, unique to Bitcoin, that could be the driver of success. For example, Ordinals, right? It had the unique property of being 100% on chain. And that's why one of the reasons that it grew so fast, right? So I think first we need to build the basic infrastructure for all these things, right? Like people need to be able to transfer fungible tokens on Bitcoin easily, to store them easily. First, maybe like replicate the kind of functionality that already is there on other chains. And then developers can take this and build things on top of it, right? Make it more unique to Bitcoin. I think one of the cool use cases for a fungible token on Bitcoin is stablecoins, right? If you're able to issue like a USD stablecoin just on layer one Bitcoin, I think that's actually quite compelling, because then you could even do like a trustless swap of Bitcoin to, whatever this stablecoin is, right? And, then you can even use it to power in-person or online, buying and selling of other goods, right? Like what Bitcoin wanted to do from the start, which is be money, right? To be used as money. And I think, I personally have run into this, which is, if you actually go and try to spend Bitcoin, you always think about, oh, the price today is pretty low, right? Why should I spend it today when tomorrow it could be like 10% more? And I think stablecoins on Bitcoin will really solve this problem and make it easier for people to want to use it as money. Right?
Did you know that we're more than just a YouTube channel? We also built Mscribe, the first inscription platform built from the ground up for the metaverse on Bitcoin. Connect your bitmap ordinals and use our tools to bring your community into the virtual realm. Support us by joining the movement at mscribe.io. Like, comment, and subscribe for the latest alpha. Back to the video. So going back to Iman's thought here on artifacts versus NFTs, we've seen the mania kind of take off in 2020 with NFTs. Do you think the narrative of 100% on chain on Bitcoin is enough to attract another similar mania? because it's on Bitcoin?
I think so. But it shouldn't be the only thing, right? Um, with it being 100% on chain, I can see some of the more high value NFTs, assets that want to, be on chain 100% and pay for that. But for most of the use cases, I think it's okay to be not 100% on chain. So yeah, there probably needs to be something else if you wanted to
Sure.
have another sort of like hype cycle.
Yeah. I think yeah, you said something very interesting, like something native, I guess, to Bitcoin, or something unique to Bitcoin, right? We've seen that, I think, with I don't know if you've been following this, but the whole bitmap thing, like and then we've kind of like extrapolated a narrative around it, or maybe like an understanding called of digital matter theory, this process of leveraging existing blockchain information and data as a source of value creation, right? And then the bitmap ecosystem did exactly that. We've leveraged the chronology of, I guess, block introduction, and we've used that as an underpinning tool to create a metaverse framework and infrastructure out of it, right? So I think this is something that's never really been done. It is originating from this Ordinals, I think, community, right? And we're starting to see new experimentation around this process. So I think that
could be a contributing factor to, eliciting a mania. And, we keep talking about these manias, and Ken, what do you think? Are these manias important for progress in crypto, or are these like distractions?
I think they're necessary for sure. I think any sort of like new technology in the beginning will have some sort of hype cycle where people are over indexing on its success, right? And this cycle of speculation brings in attention, brings in capital for development in the future. And I think once this initial like wave settles, there's now like much more long-term potential for people to build and build more complex things on top of it. So I think it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
So when you are talking to your team and you guys are deciding on which products to build, I'm assuming that you're deciding based on a market of speculators. Would that be correct?
To a certain degree, I think. But I think we can't just look at what people currently want and just build for that.
Sure.
Because sometimes, people don't know what is out there and what could be a better experience, right? So
yeah,
we do have like a lot of market intelligence and just tapping into the community to see what people are looking for, what those features are. But we take that and sort of analyze it and see, what is it actually that people want? Is it, something else that we could build that could be like a 10x experience, right? So we're always like looking a little bit further ahead and thinking about, what else is out there that could really change the game versus just being like reacting to the market and building what people are looking for at this moment.
So does that mean that you have sort of like an outlook of like, we need to build infrastructure and this is what that infrastructure looks like? And, do you have another side of the team where it's like, okay, we have infrastructure to build and we see the market evolving in this direction, but you also see that there is an existing market of speculators who just want, to, trade shit coins, for example, right? So how do you make the decision on like building the infrastructure where it's kind of a gamble, right? You don't really know it's going to go in that direction.
And especially at this stage, right? Because you guys are in your basically seed form, right? You just raised the seed round. So we understand because we are in the same stage as you guys with our project and our development cycle. So
and we have to deal with the exact same question I'm asking you. And that's why I want to.
Yeah, because obviously resources they're not infinite, right? We have to make very strategic choices, right? And what directions we want to go. So yeah, that's an excellent question. How do you guys approach this dilemma, I guess, if
Yeah.
you call it that?
Yeah, we're a pretty small team too. We only have 15 people right now, and our engineering team basically can tackle like maybe like 2 features
Yeah.
concurrently at the same time.
Of course.
So we kind of like split between like half the team maybe working on things people are looking for right now, and then we have part of the team building out things that we think will be coming to the picture like 3 to 5 months down the road. Yeah, otherwise, a startup is all about taking risks and experimenting, right? Like there's I don't think there is a formula to it where you can be like 100% sure that you're making the right bet.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, we have a similar approach as well, and we look at it as like MVPs. It's like we're testing out our assumptions. We release the MVP, see if it sticks, and get some feedback. So you're right. It's extremely tough to figure out like what is it that makes sense to build, and infrastructure, or do you just cater to like what the chatter is on Twitter?
Correct, but it seems to be a reoccurring theme. It's if we do not go down the infrastructure route, we're stuck in a situation where we're pigeonholed into a non-optimal environment, right? And we're waiting around for somebody else to build this critical infrastructure, which we've done that in the past, and it doesn't work, right? So no matter what, we're kind of tasked to figure out what the infrastructure layers are, and regardless of resources or how big the team is, like we've got to tackle these issues no matter what.
Yeah.
Right. So and you guys focusing on ordinals and building on Bitcoin, I'm sure that is what you're confronted with every day. It's like you cannot wait around for infrastructure to just appear.
Yeah.
You guys are responsible basically of laying down these foundations, right? So it is a big task, right? Does it ever overwhelm in any sense?
Oh yeah, for sure. Every day we're making decisions on like, should we build like a better indexer ourselves, or like
dude,
I think we're so early in this space. Like there's so much work to be done just to have like things functioning normally. That like it's almost crazy like how much there is to do right now. So it is definitely a tough decision for us as well.
Yeah. Did you know that we're more than just a YouTube channel?
We also built MetaZone, the first app store for the metaverse.
Buy, sell, and explore a new class of digital assets like our flagship game, Rovi.ai.
Support us by collecting your digital assets through MetaZone at metazone.io.
Like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated.
Back to the video.
You mentioned the word indexer, and we were talking about the uniqueness of ordinals. And even though ordinals are extremely unique, right? Bitcoin, all that stuff, it's cool. I think it comes with unintended consequences, which are called indexers.
Yeah.
And so I want to get your thoughts on like, not necessarily the indexer ecosystem, but just like the fact that we need indexers to organize what's going on ordinals. So like, just take me through your thoughts on just like the indexer concept, because I think it's not necessarily new because we have indexers on Ethereum, but it's an infrastructure piece that is so critical that we can't live without it, basically.
Yeah, so basically indexers, all they do is they organize all the data that's on chain, put on chain by inscriptions or ordinal inscriptions, and put them into a format that is that can be understood by clients, right? For example, you have these BRC20 tokens, and everybody's sending transactions. There's mints, and there's like a whole history of transfers and mints on chain. But what is the current balance, right? What address owns how much of what token, right? If you wanted to figure that out, you can either go back to whenever Ordinals started and look through every single Bitcoin block since then to arrive at the current picture that you have today. Or you have these indexers whose job is to just constantly do that and provide you with a database that you can query to get the latest, right? And I think recently we've started to notice that because there is no like standard, like or a really good standard for indexers, People have been making their own custom implementations, which are slightly different from, the original indexing algorithm that Casey built with Ordinals. And we actually started to see some discrepancies, right?
Yes.
Like if you look at some explorers, they would say this inscription belongs to this address, and some other ones would say it's a different address. And that's just like concerning, especially when it comes to Bitcoin, right? Because it's supposed to be immutable. So I think the problem lies in kind of like the centralization of indexers. For example, I think maybe like 90% of the projects and the infrastructure for BRC20 is probably dependent on Unisat's indexer for BRC20, and that's not a good thing, because if their indexer goes down, basically most people won't be able to query balances.
That's right.
And it opens up the opportunity for people who have malicious intent to like scam people, right? So I think we really need to come up with a better way of doing this. And just like how we tell people, if you really care about Bitcoin, you run your own nodes, right? I think we need to help indexing become more decentralized. And we're looking into it ourselves as well to see how we can tackle this problem. But it's definitely something that I think is starting to become more concerning in the ecosystem.
I 100% agree. I feel like this is something that we got to collaborate on, because let me outline a problem that I see. So we have Xverse, and they're like, okay, it looks like we need to build our own indexer because of these reasons. And then it's us. It's like, we need to build our own indexer because of these reasons. And the two different reasons are completely different, right? We want to support one aspect of the metaverse. You guys are doing your own thing because you see other importance. And so how do we reconcile our views on indexers and what we think is important to index, and like contribute to innovation? Like, for example, we were talking about this idea that we had. It's called DMT, digital matter theory. And it's just a name that identifies the utilization of Bitcoin's data, right? And so we're saying, okay, if we utilize this, we need an indexer to recognize this meta protocol, right? So if we do this, if we have our own indexer that recognizes this meta protocol, how do we get, let's say, Xverse's indexer to support that meta protocol as well? Do you think it's going to be some sort of technical tool that we build collectively that allows us to communicate indexers to each other? Or is it more of like manual collaborations, like here's the JSON data that we use to collect this information, and here it is, send it to you guys? Like, how do we do this? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so one way that we thought of to solve this problem is to have like an indexer of indexers, right? So you can query this indexer that then queries all the different indexers and gets information from those places, and then compares them, and maybe also provide kind of like a confidence score, right? Is how confident are you that this data is correct? Is it 90% or 100%? And then the users can take that and make a decision on their own, right? And that way, if you have like 3 out of 5 indexers that you're querying coming back with a different set of data, you can basically say, we have like 0% confidence that this is correct. So you better watch out if you're, waiting on somebody to send you these funds, or buying something with your BRC20 tokens.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of something like that, but that makes sense, because we need to somehow enable people to come up with these new meta protocols, because that's what moves progress, right? Like example for bitmaps.
Yeah.
And so you develop these meta protocols, but there needs to be some institution, some like an oracle, an indexer oracle, an indexer of indexers that recognizes these meta protocols and just, I don't know, I guess supports it. And whether or not a market develops, then the upkeep of that data, of that meta protocol, maybe just goes away just because nobody's using it or nobody likes it, right? but we need to foster some way where projects can come up with these meta protocols and it gets recognized so that the invisible hand, as we say, decides which meta protocols end up getting actual traction.
So is this not like, because you understand the graph, is this not the graph, or is this something different, a situation that is
it is
unparalleled?
like the graph.
Right.
GraphQLs, developers come up with these.
So why don't they just kind of come over to support what's being built on Ordinals, or is it something like that has to come from within? Like, is that?
I think Graph is so huge, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, on your thoughts here, but I think Graph is so huge that they need to see traction. They need to see like actual, you know, people using money spent, liquidity, all that stuff for them to support the Bitcoin blockchain.
So then most likely it will have to come from within, right? The people who it's most pertinent to us, right? Like you're saying, we kind of have to collaborate and to build our own like GraphQL system, right? I can see that.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Ken, on like building the graph
for Bitcoin.
on Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, there needs to be like financial incentives, right, for a lot of these companies to come in. And I just don't see that happening like organically right now. So yeah, I agree. You know, this probably has to come from within. Maybe one of the bigger projects in the space will have to take it up and do something about it.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. It really paints a picture of just exactly how early we are and how you know, this infrastructure period is always the most difficult to get through, but it is the most critical, right? Because our existence in Web3, we came in around 2019-ish. So I think a lot of that predated our entry into the space. So we came in where things were much more in place, right? We started building. It was like, oh, we ran into issues, I guess technical issues, and there was a solution to that.
Right.
I guess somebody already built all this, right?
Yeah.
But I guess we don't have the right experience pre that.
Yeah.
How did that all assemble like in the years
organically?
Yeah, from 2015 to leading up to 2019, right? So there should be ways we can extract or reference those events and then apply them here to Ordinals, right?
Yeah, I guess a cheat way to do this is somebody has access to like the graph team,
right? And
it'd be like, hey, you need to take a look at Ordinals.
Yeah.
But
it is fascinating though that this is such a problem, and this is going to require, I guess, quite the effort amongst all the founders, right, in this Ordinal space.
Yeah.
All
right. So what do you think are the main pain points for Ordinals?
I guess outside of indexing, because that you guys are focused on, right?
Yeah. What are the main pain points that you see today that you guys are focusing on as far as Xverse wallet?
Yeah. So one of the things we're focused on right now is how do you actually keep your ordinals safe, right? And this sort of relates to the indexing problem. So if you look into like how Xverse handles addresses, we actually have two different addresses in your Bitcoin wallet. One of them, you can store like regular Bitcoin that you use to buy things. And then we have a different address, a taproot address, that is just for your ordinals, right? And obviously that's not a great user experience because people who are just coming into the space don't understand, why do I have two addresses when it's just Bitcoin, right?
Yep.
And the main reason for that is, in the beginning, indexers were not very reliable, and sometimes they just don't function very well. If there's a reorg, they actually go down for like a really long period of time, and you basically cannot tell whether or not the Bitcoin that you have in your wallet is a ordinal, does it have an inscription, or is it just regular Bitcoin? And that leads to a problem where if you only had one address and all of your Bitcoin, including ordinals, was in the same address, you could very easily accidentally spend your expensive ordinals when you go and send like 0.1 Bitcoin to somebody, or when you go and like buy another ordinal on the marketplace, right? So we're trying to figure out a way so that we can combine these two addresses, and people only have to copy and paste one address and be able to receive everything from regular Bitcoin ordinals to BRC20 tokens, or whatever other fungible token standard we have in the future. And I think it's kind of a tough problem in that you have to solve the indexing issues, but also like how we internally keep track of these, UTXOs or outputs to make sure that even when the network or these indexers are not functioning correctly, you still have like reasonable assurance that you won't be accidentally spending your ordinals for things like
Sure.
purchases or fees. So yeah, that's one of the problems that we're focused on solving right now.
Yeah, we had a similar issue as well, and it turns out that there's some algorithms out there, very simple algorithms that say first in, first out. So any UTXOs that you were using, you use that as spending, and everything else you use that as like you kind of like don't touch it. But that's not a foolproof system either. So is this something that you have to develop? I guess originally, like is this like a custom build for you guys, or are you kind of looking around for other tools that help solve that?
Yeah, we're custom building this. So we're building, a way to like organize your UTXOs to prevent this problem from happening. And we're also, looking to the indexing side of this as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of issues. So when you were in Stacks, did you see similar like infrastructure issues while you were on that team and on that side of like the Bitcoin ecosystem? Did you see similar like infancy stuff on Stacks, or is Bitcoin Ordinals sort of like unique in that way that we're that early?
Yeah, for sure. Stacks definitely had its own, growing pains since when it started. But I think it's a little bit different in that Stacks was still so new and open to change. So if you had a problem, you could, open the proposal and actually make changes to the protocol.
Mm.
Whereas on Bitcoin, like it's basically impossible for you to make a change on the base layer, layer one, the protocol itself. So you end up like adding things to it on top of it to fix problems, and with that you had the risk of introducing more problems, right? So it's really like a different environment that you're building in.
Mm-hmm. So when you were talking to your investors, what was it about, like what's happening in Ordinals ecosystem that your investors were interested in? Like, what was it the main thing that they were like, okay, we're investing in Xverse wallet?
Yeah, I think it depends on the investor, right? Some investors are really into the NFT metaverse space, and they just saw that Ordinals being on Bitcoin has a lot of potential by itself, to become like a very dominant NFT asset protocol. But for some other investors, I think what they see with Ordinals is that there is demand for Web3 like functionality on Bitcoin, and they're more looking towards the future where better infrastructure is in place, and you can basically have everything from NFTs to DeFi and other things, smart contracts on Bitcoin. And Bitcoin as a chain, if you look at just the market cap of Bitcoin, it's basically more than twice that of Ethereum, right? And Ethereum, its market value is basically the tokens and the other protocols being built using its smart contract system. Whereas for Bitcoin, there's still like relatively few applications built on top of it. So if we're able to fully unlock the potential of Web3 on Bitcoin, that represents a much bigger market. And there's a lot more money that can be put into Bitcoin Web3 versus Ethereum and some of the other chains.
Well, that's good to hear that, because that's exactly why we started paying attention too.
Yeah.
We had these same conversations like we're talking early days when Ordinals was just
like March.
Well, even like February when we first got introduced, where everything was, you needed a node. We were trying to figure out how we inscribe. We were like, oh, we don't have a Bitcoin full node, so I guess we can't. And then we started to see these inscription tools popping up, and we're like, okay, time to really start paying attention. The infrastructure is coming. right? But the thesis was sound, even to us. Like there's, and this is coming from me. I was like the ultimate Bitcoin. What's the opposite of maxi? I was fading. I was fading Bitcoin just because to me it was so boring. not any innate value proposition to Bitcoin. It's fine. I understood why the world was adopting it. It's great, but
yeah, for that.
But I was paying attention to everything else because of all the action happening, all the development and the building, the culture behind that. Right.
Yeah.
That's what was interesting to me.
Yeah.
And then I started seeing that's happening on Bitcoin, and all of a sudden, it's all we could talk about now. It's all we care about at the moment because it's just so interesting to see this infrastructure just roll out before our eyes.
Yeah,
and the potential, I guess, you and your investors see.
Yeah,
of if we can unlock this potential on Bitcoin, what can that do? Right, it's potentially massive, something we haven't seen before.
Yeah, and it's such a huge risk on your investors' part because it's so new, it's so like untested. I mean, we have counterparts, right? We have NFTs on Ethereum, and that took off. That was like a $60 billion thing for like a stretch. But and then imagine that. I mean, imagine that happening on top of Bitcoin. I mean, you could like it's 2.5x potential.
Yeah,
you know, so you got really smart investors.
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, we agree with them.
We align with them because we see the value here as they do, and so that's good news because this instills a lot of confidence in like the Bitcoin ecosystem, right? The Ordinals ecosystem.
And yeah, speaking of that, so we've talked a lot about stacks and Ordinals. There's other, I guess, like floating attempts out there like stamps and SRC20s, and I've been hearing things about ORC20s and stuff like that. Like
other meta protocols.
Correct. And yeah, a lot of these are addressing some of the pain points of Ordinals itself, and they're using different, I guess, mechanisms native to Bitcoin to kind of do the same things Ordinals do, but in a different, I don't know, style, I guess. And there's like little communities around them. Like, are you guys investigating that and whether or not you should support it? Have you seen traction in any of these other experiments, or right now is it just purely stacks and Ordinals?
Yeah, we're keeping our eyes on all these protocols. We are investigating. I think some of these really have potential. It's just that we have a small team right now. We really have to focus on like the low hanging fruit, right?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of these protocols will eventually get to integrating them. For something like ORC20 or SRC, I think from what I've seen so far, they're good, but I think there just it hasn't been like a really, really good protocol that people can say, oh yeah, this is definitely better than BRC20 right now. And it offers so much more that once we integrate with it, everyone is going to come and use it, right?
Yeah.
I think there still needs to be a lot of work done there, but we're open to integrating these protocols.
Yeah.
And if we see like something is definitely picking up traction, we'll definitely support it.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it because you can't, like you're saying, the small team, you can't support everything. And it doesn't make sense to support everything because, if there's no traction, there's no reason to support it.
Yeah, even if it makes like technical sense, like like if one meta protocol is better than the other.
Better, like it doesn't mean people are going to use it.
Yeah, it always boils down to that, right? Like where is the liquidity? Where is the consensus, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's like BRC20s forever, I guess we're just stuck.
It could be.
It could be, but I don't know. Unlikely, maybe. Maybe is the word.
Yeah, I would say it's very unlikely. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And then there's like projects, building on top of like this the BRC20, and they're building some sort of a Bitcoin virtual machine on Bitcoin, which is very interesting. But we need to see that get traction as well before anyone starts supporting anything like that.
Correct.
So it's a tough space. It's like that's why to us, I mean we come from like the metaverse background, and so one of our we share investors, Sophermian. They're the ones really focused on the metaverse, and when we saw Bitmap And once we talked about it on our podcast, it took off. In 17 days. It inscribed out 800,000 roughly.
It's true.
Got inscribed out, and so that is the adoption that we need to see in like any new meta protocol in order for anyone to support it. So as soon as that, like,
that was a confirmation for us.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
It was like we got to contribute here, we got to build here, we have to, take our existing project and support this ecosystem, because I mean that traction was huge, right?
And purely organic.
Yeah. So yeah, things like that is what gives us indicators that we need to support anything, just like you see with any ORC 20 meta protocol development. So do you see how do you solve the congestion issue? Is like we were talking about going to stacks. Is that how we should think about solving the congestion issues? Is stacks like the go-to?
And do you have any insight, I guess, to where is Lightning Network going to kind of like factor into all of this? Because we saw Taproot assets, like they were working on something like that. And then we looked into, I think their CTO put out like a like a blog or a PowerPoint presentation, how he's going to bring in ZK into all of this. So we're very interested to hear like what is next for this scaling dilemma. And do you have any unique insight into that?
So I think I'm much closer to the Stacks ecosystem because I know the people working on it, and I think it comes down to like who can work faster and release like a product that people can get their hands on, and what that user experience looks like. For me right now, I think Stacks is a little bit further along in that there is like a slower version of what's to come in like a few months that you can actually play with, build smart contracts. And then in a few months, there's going to be SBTC, where now you have like this pegged Bitcoin that's trustless that you can move between layers and use in smart contracts, and faster blocks, which means you can now scale these transactions for Ordinals or BRC20, make it faster and have more transactions going on per block, right? I think we also are looking into Taproot assets, and I think it's really interesting as well. But I think we need to see like more, I guess, better developer experience. Like when can we start building support for this, right? Like right now, I think it's a little bit too early still.
Yeah.
Do you ever, in kind of like your strategy, kind of like development meetings and just your thought process on building products and supporting markets, do you ever consider, what's happening with like regulations and the SEC going after basically everything in Ethereum?
Yeah.
Like, does that enter your peripherals when making decisions, or are you just like, shoot from the hip and
I wonder if somehow this becomes like a value feature of building on Bitcoin, just because we've seen the SEC stance more positively against like for Bitcoin, right? So
yeah,
maybe somehow it could be interpreted like building decentralized applications on Bitcoin framework or infrastructure would be less of a in the scopes of the SEC potentially, right? So
yeah, it's like the SEC really doesn't care unless there's $1 billion being exchanged.
Yeah.
So does it really matter? Like for us builders, should it matter? What the SEC is doing, or does traction and like liquidity? That's when you start making these considerations. What do you think, Ken?
I think you should have like regulations in mind always, because if you want to scale your business or project, you definitely have to, be compliant with the regulations. Otherwise, you just wouldn't be able to grow beyond your initial size, right? And I think for Bitcoin, it's really interesting because in the past, Bitcoin has just been this very simple asset, that you could potentially just call a commodity that people buy and hold, and they can use it as money if they want. But there isn't this like ICO or a lot of tokens, fungible tokens, that could get you in trouble with the SEC in terms of is this a security or not? But now that we're seeing BRC20 on Bitcoin, it's possible that, some projects will decide to issue tokens and have these ICOs on Bitcoin, right? Maybe some of them will be compliant, some of them will be, useful. But for sure, some of them are going to run into issues with regulation, right?
Yeah.
At that point, is the SEC's view on Bitcoin going to stay the same, or are they going to treat it just like Ethereum, right? I think that's hard to say at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like you can make security assets on Bitcoin. It's just like how it's being marketed and it's how it's being treated. So I think the SEC will come in at some point, right? So I think it does make sense to consider regulations when building anything. I had a business question for you, Ken. What, as a wallet, what is your monetization strategy as far as like, building out a wallet, and like how do you monetize something like that? Because I don't know how MetaMask monetizes. I guess like swapping within the MetaMask protocol. So how do you guys like consider monetizing a wallet?
Yeah, so I think we're still super early. So what we're focused on right now is building the best possible product that's going to onboard more users rather than just focusing on how we're going to make money. But there are definitely a lot of ways that we can generate revenue. So one way is through on-ramps, right? So we've partnered with, companies that allow you to purchase crypto and deposit directly into your wallet very easily. And, we can make revenue off of that. But if you take MetaMask as an example, they generated a lot of revenue from their swaps product, right? And all they're doing is connecting users to different decentralized exchanges and basically providing the convenience and finding them sort of like the lowest execution costs for the trade that they want. Yeah. And it turns out to be a really great business model, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot more in terms of business models for wallets. But I think we should really focus on building out a good product that can have mass adoption. And then it'll be, easy to like turn on these revenue models down the road.
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of like explanation, just because this is a side that we're not exposed to. Like, for example, we have Xverse wallet connected to our mScribe project focusing on bitmaps. And so, I was just curious is like how one monetizes a wallet, since people expect, to have a wallet and like there's no real cost associated with it. But yeah, swapping tokens would be probably like a no-brainer.
Yeah. Or really just like integrating as much, like becoming the like all-in-one app for Web3.
Yeah.
Seems like the most optimal strategy.
On Bitcoin, hell yeah.
Well, in all chains cases, like if you want to become that killer, that is like the killer app of Web3,
That is, yeah.
Being that all-in-one servicer, right? And making things easy to the end user, because obviously things are not, right? And that it needs to get to that point or else.
So are you, the onboarding, is that going to be happening through the wallet itself, or do you have like a separate interface like on the website where you basically, convert fiat to crypto?
You mean in terms of the on-ramp or the swaps?
Correct. Yeah.
On-ramp.
The on-ramp.
Yeah, so we actually don't build any of that right now. So we basically point them to the partners that we work with, and they've already built this whole onboarding, KYC, and everything.
Sure.
So we don't have to worry about that for now.
Yeah, that's good. All right. So final thoughts here. What are the chances that the Bitcoin ecosystem's developer ecosystem surpasses something like Ethereum? Is this like a 1% chance, or are we talking like above 50% chance?
I think it's inevitable, right? Because like we already see so much growth even in a deep bear market.
Yeah.
And like a lot of the developers that are building on Ethereum right now, they actually started building on Bitcoin, and then they went to Ethereum because they couldn't build what they wanted to build on Bitcoin. But if we're able to allow these developers to build what they want, I think they'll come.
Yeah.
And if we hit the next bull market and more capital starts coming in and there's more attention on Bitcoin and the infrastructure is in a better place than it is now, then I think there's a very, very good chance that we'll see more development happening on Bitcoin versus something like Ethereum.
See, I told you Bitcoin was cool, dude.
TJ, sorry, dude.
Yeah.
True despair.
Sorry, dude. Well, that's interesting. And so we're back to kind of like a flippening moment, I guess, back to 2017, right? It was like, well, I guess it's like there's no flippening, right? Because Bitcoin.
Yeah, this is not the flippening I wanted, Ivan.
Yeah, this is more like the stompening or something. I don't know what's gonna happen to everything else if everyone does just come back to Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, if the Bitcoin ecosystem can offer similar counterparts to the Ethereum ecosystem in terms of functionality and developer ecosystem, like why would any developer build anywhere else?
Well, there's gonna I guess it's like a wait and see question, right? Because obviously, even if Bitcoin does just win out everything, there's got to be enough to go around from everywhere else. I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be interesting, but this definitely feels like a hot enough narrative to get enough people interested and re-engaged into this space, right? Bitcoin versus Ethereum. Who's got the best dApps? Who's got the best DeFi? Who's got the best NFTs? And who's got the best metaverse experiences? Like that is interesting.
Oh, right?
And people will want to be like,
you need that competition.
Part of that. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Ken, final thoughts. Like, what's like, I guess any final thoughts that you have to say? Any alpha releases? Anything to look forward to as far as Xverse wallet?
Yeah. So in the next little while, we are focused on developer infrastructure. So we're going to be releasing a few features that are focused on developers and helping them build their products. So this is going to happen in the next week or two. So awesome. Stay tuned and you'll be surprised.
Okay, well, let's stay in touch, Ken. I really appreciate you joining us. This has been, just kind of fantastic to talk about, Bitcoin. This is a small ecosystem still, and it's important that we stay in contact and just keep up with each other's development. Just because we don't want to build anything that you're already building, and I'm assuming you agree with that, vice versa. So, so thank you, Ken, for showing up. I know it's super late, and we'll be happy to have you back on the podcast anytime that you want. So, thank you so much, Ken.
Yeah, happy to, and thanks for having me.
All right, guys. All the links will be in the description. I appreciate you guys for watching, and we'll catch you in the next podcast.
Peace out.